Please join me as I ring the Tibetan bowl as a call to service. Listen as the sound fills the sanctuary and then recedes back into the silence. This is the time we open our hearts and minds to receive the love we bring each other. Thank you, Kate. Well, good morning and welcome home, Unitarian Universalists of the Chester River. Welcome to those in our sanctuary, as well as those on Zoom. Welcome members and friends and visitors as we begin a new church year. Each of us has weathered a lot in this past year, including COVID, unrest in the world and within our own borders, the memory of 9/11, the 21st anniversary of that is today. If your spirit is weary, take a needed breath, and may you find renewal and peace in this hour that we spend together. In this morning's ingathering, let us be grateful for the blessings that we share. Gratitude for the breath that you are breathing just now. There's no guarantee for that one. Gratitude for the person by your side. Gratitude for the memories that warm our hearts. By our gathering, we bless each other and this place, and in its shelter, we are blessed in return. My name is Annie Lavin, and I am your service leader this morning. as we return after the summer months when some of us were away for a long period of time, others a short period of time, that every single Sunday, our chalice was lit as we had our services, including the discussions led by many of you in this room today. This morning, our longtime friend of UUCR, Reverend Greg Shute, returns to our pulpit and is speaking to us about belonging, a theme many UU churches will be using in the month of September. His sermon is titled, "Where Do You Belong?" And together, we'll be exploring the many groups of which we're members and consider how we fit in and how they fulfill our need for belonging. Our guest musician, who many of you may recognize, is Kate Bennett, recently retired music director and organist at the Presbyterian Church, our neighbor right across the street. She's been with them since 2004, and she's also worked with Kent School and Washington College, been part of a band called the Cowboy Jazz, worked in community theater, and so much more. And today, she's here with us, rounding out a wonderful career. Thank you. Thank you, Kate. Our thanks to Diane Shields, our greeter this morning, and Nancy Holland, who's preparing the coffee. And as always, the tech team have been with us since the beginning. Jim Lavin and John Ramsey, we welcome the gifts that you bring to the service. For our announcements, I ask you to be ongoingly checking for the reopening guidelines that are in Reflections and elsewhere. Just a couple that I'll mention this morning. I know that we all know to sign in or put a check next to our name as we come in case there would be a need for contact tracing. Masks are optional today. Joys and concerns, we ask you just to come up and you'll stand where I am and I will light the candle for you. We will be passing the basket for the first time in years. We have coffee afterwards, and very important, after this is our congregational meeting where we'll be voting on two really important items. We need your voice, we need your vote. So after service, we'll have coffee, stretch your legs, come back in, and we'll attend to business. It won't take long, but it's real important. And now, let us begin. We will have our chalice lighting, and Reverend Greg Shute will read the words as I light the chalice.
It is now. Thanks. There is a lovely balance at the heart of our nature. Each of us is utterly unique, and yet we live in the most intimate kinship with everyone and everything else. Our intention is to awaken to the great belonging which embraces everything. Our hunger is to know that we are not outsiders cut off from everything, but rather participants at the heart of creation. We light our chalice this morning in celebration of that awareness and that awakening.
Well, opening words, I'd like to remind you, in case you didn't remember, that Labor Day has come and gone and September is here and the rhythm of the seasons continue. Today, at this ingathering, we celebrate the beginning of our 30th year as Unitarian Universalists of the Chester River, with a rich, rich history reflecting all that has brought us to this moment in time. From those early worship services held at Washington College, later moving to the beloved Quaker Meeting House where we were for many years, to the purchase of this slot on Gateway and onto the building of our church home. So many good people have come through these doors, yourselves included, and many others now gone, and yet each a part of the fabric of this faith community. I am awed and humbled remembering faces and hearing voices now gone, laughter, and the creative spirit and deeds of so many, which we in turn are now building upon as we live out our UU principles and are the liberal religious presence in this community That was the dream of Peter Tapke, our benefactor, and we are fulfilling the dream. This year, we have a new board president, Lynn Geisert, so fortunate. And I'd like to mention her board as well. MQ Riding is her vice president. Terry Goldzier is the treasurer. Jane Hardy, secretary. Jackie Mathwich, Catherine Brooks, and Les Palmer are trustees. Into the hands of these fellow congregants and others who head up and work on committees, we are entrusting the leadership of the beloved community in 2022 and 2023. As an aside, I wanted to share that yesterday around noontime or a little before, I pulled up and this little church was abuzz with activity. Diane was in the front with a shovel and all kinds of serious gardening equipment. Nancy and Terry were painting all the railings in blazing sun for hours and hours. Darlene was working on this beautiful order of service, which took lots of time and talent and heart. Jim was hanging signs for today's meeting and rearranging the chairs. And I thought, this is the heart, this is the spirit of UUCR, which we have all engaged in so many times. And that makes us what we are today. I'll close with these words of Michael Schuler. If you are proud of this church, become its advocate. As we look ahead to its future, share its message. If its values resonate deep within you, give it a measure of your devotion. And so this morning, we welcome each and every one of you as we start our 30th year as the Unitarian Universalists of the Chester River. Our first hymn this morning is in your gray hymnal. It is number 361, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In. The hymnals are, there's probably in the tray in front of you for those who are guests. That was number 361, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In.
3 verses, right?
We'll do 3 verses, would be great, yes, yes. Open your eyes as you are able. Rejoice and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your ears to the song. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your hearts, everyone. Open your hearts, everyone. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Now, Reverend Shute, better known as Greg to all of us, he and I are going to do a shared reading. The poet David White invites you and me, all of us, to put down the weight of our aloneness and ease into the conversation of life where we all have a voice. We belong to ourselves, but we also belong to our families and friends and communities, neighborhoods, and more. In our quest to belong, we seek those connections that feed our soul. Greg and I will read this adaptation from a work by the poet and writer Starhawk. It's entitled, This Must Be the Place.
Somewhere there are people to whom we can speak with passion without having the words catch in our throats.
And somewhere there are hands open to welcome and receive us as we are.
Somewhere there are eyes which light up when we enter and greet us with a smile.
Somewhere there are voices which call us to celebrate together the wonder of it all.
Somewhere there is a community of strength that joins our strength to do the work that needs to be done.
Somewhere there are arms to hold us when we falter and to help us stand upright again.
Somewhere there is a circle of healing which replenishes our spirit and restores our soul.
And somewhere there is a gathering of friends who encourage and invite us to be brave and strong, compassionate and kind.
Somewhere there is a place where I can be me, and we are all free to be ourselves.
And somewhere there's a place of peace that recognizes my longing for peace.
Let us adventure there together. I as I am,
You as you are,
and
we
we as we are, that we may all be blessed and made whole.
And now we have acknowledgements of the heart, a time when we share the joys and concerns, the pain and the happiness in our lives. It's a great way of building community and helps us learn more about each other. I invite you to come forward. You can stand where I'm standing now, and I will light the candle for you. The first candle I will light, as is our tradition, for all those who have been affected by COVID. That's each of us. Those who have cared for us during this time, and those suffering in any way in body or spirit. Someone like to come up with another joy or concern?
Well, I have a little joy to share, and as the people that were here at church yesterday looked out in the parking lot, up drove a car and somebody got out that looked really familiar, and it was John LaFurla. So we hadn't seen him in a long time, and he was one of the people that inspired the Memorial Woodland Garden. So we walked down there together, and just was really nice to see him. He said Susan's well, so doing well. And most of you might not have even noticed there was a peace pole out front within the bushes. It had grown up so much it was hard to see. So I pulled it out of the ground yesterday. We're going to try to refinish it and put it in a better spot. So.
Thank you, Diane.
Couple things I wanted to share. Betty Kerr wasn't able to make it today. She's a little bit under the weather. Last night, my parents and I went to Churchill Theater, where they have a show called Clybourne Park, which addresses issues of gender and race in the United States. It was really good. It was really lightly attended. I had the whole front row center section to myself. So I just wanted to encourage everyone to consider going. It's going to be on for the next 2 weekends at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday and 2 p.m. on Sunday. And finally, my father is sharing a bounty of tomatoes. In the lobby, there are plastic bags as well.
Picked in the rain.
First, we have to remember all those that died, the thousands that died on 9/11 and 2001. So they will always be heavy in our hearts. Marcy, my wife's sister, had a stroke last week, and they've also found a mass in her sinus cavity. So there's a lot of things that we don't know exactly what's going on, but she's in the hospital. She's in a lot of pain and fairly incoherent at this time. So we're hoping for the best.
I will light the final candle for all of those joys and concerns that remain in our hearts unspoken. Have a moment of silence. Blessed be. And now is the time for the offering, which we haven't had in years and years. We have a chance to hear more of Kate's wonderful music as I pass the basket. This is to support and sustain this place, which is special to so many of us, a place of memory and of hope, for we are now the keepers of the dream. And now I invite you into a time of meditation, a chance to sit back and open your minds and just relax as you hear these beautiful words by Bert and Carly. It's entitled September Meditation. I do not know if the seasons remember their history, or if the days and nights by which we count time remember their own passing. I do not know if the oak tree remembers its planting, or if the pine remembers its slow climb towards sun and stars. I do not know if the squirrel remembers last fall's gathering, or if the blue jay remembers the meaning of snow. I do not know if the air remembers September, or if the night remembers the moon. Perhaps that is the reason for our births, to be the memory keepers for creation. Perhaps salvation is something very different than anyone ever expected. Perhaps this will be the only question we have to answer. What can you tell me about September? Let us take a moment to reflect on these words and the beauty of the season. Blessed be. We sing again. So the gray hymnals, number 318. It is the song "We Would Be One" on page 318 in the gray hymnal. Stand as you are able. UUCR is so fortunate to have our friend of many years here for Ingathering. Some years ago, he was our own consulting minister, and he is now Minister Emeritus of the UUs of Central Delaware. Now in retirement, Greg is enjoying the sweet life with his wife, Mary, and many trips abroad for extended periods. He's well known in Tuscany, I hear. We love his good energy and happy he's with us. He will speak on "Where Do You Belong?"
Thanks.
You're welcome.
It's wonderful to be here again. I feel like I belong here. Yeah, I was standing here and Diane came up with my name tag. This is an antique. Years ago, anthropologist Margaret Mead was asked by a student what she considered to be the first signs of civilization in a culture. The student expected Mead to talk about fish hooks or clay pots or grinding stones. But no, Mead said that the first sign of civilization in an ancient culture was a femur, a thigh bone that had been broken and then healed. Mead explained that in the animal kingdom, if you break your leg, you die. You cannot run from danger, you cannot get to the river for a drink, or you cannot hunt for food. You are meat for prowling beasts, so no animal survives a broken leg long enough for the bone to heal. A broken femur that has healed is evidence that someone has taken time to stay with the one who fell, has bound up the wound, has carried the person to safety, and has tended that person through recovery. Helping someone else through difficulty is where civilization starts. I was really taken by that we go to museums and we read about the archaeological finds that reveal the history of humankind. And we see things like those broken potteries and all those signs of civilization, higher culture. when the reality is that civilization is something far deeper than that. And it's about people, not things. I was looking for some reference that I could share with you and found a wonderful book by Owen Eastman called Belonging. And he writes, our ancestors deeply understood our primal need to belong before psychology or neuroscience gathered the proof. It was visceral to them, part of every day and every decision. From the time our human ancestors left the forests to live on the grasslands, the greatest determinant of individual survival was whether they belonged to a strong group or not. On those grasslands, we carried obvious physiological disadvantages to other animals. As science writer David Barabee writes, it's not hard to see why humans should have evolved to care about their teams and their place on those teams. Relying on each other is a sound survival strategy for a frail, noisy creature without a lot of built-in weapons. Living in groups is a ticket to survival, which is why most primates live in groups. The one true competitive advantage we found was strength in togetherness. This was what gave us a fighting chance of survival. From this brutal reality, the super strength of Homo sapiens emerged, the ability to form strongly bonded and highly effective groups. Isolation or rejection from a group spelled premature death. Those two states still terrify the hell out of us. There has never been a time in human history when our well-being has not been tied to belonging to a group. I think that is very true. We all belong to so many groups. And it's not just about physical survival so much anymore. Certainly, that's the origin of our being a social creature as we are, to have groups that can aid us in defense and aid us in finding food and aid us in health and well-being. But there's something bigger than that also, I think, in a belonging. It's a sense of finding out who we are as individuals and belonging to groups that help us reflect and reinvent ourselves and to figure out who we are. I was thinking a lot about this, and the first thing that came to my mind was I strongly recommend this. When I was at seminary, one of the first things we had to do was to write a paper entitled My Family of Origin. So I strongly recommend you all sit down and do that. And by that, I don't mean an autobiography, because what they asked was to focus on those parts of our past life that we think shaped who we are today. And it was interesting because they asked, particularly as being in seminary, which I also strongly recommend, they said, focus on your relationship with the church and or with religion or spirituality or whatever as a significant part of this. And I really had never thought of that. When I was a kid growing up, I played baseball and I played basketball, and then I went off to college and so my sense of identity was wrapped up in more of those sort of physical pieces of it. But when I stopped to think about it, as many of you know, I have been estranged from my family my nuclear family for a long time. I never fit in. I never belonged in my family as a child. And so I was thinking about the church, and my parents were Unitarians in the 50s. They went twice a year, Christmas and Easter. But thinking back, on Sunday mornings, I would get up and I would get dressed up and I would say, I'm going to church. Is anybody going? I'm talking about 7, 8 years old. I'm going to church. Anybody going with me? And back then, I could walk this 7 or 8 blocks. And I would go to church. And I don't really remember too much about what we did there, Sunday school. But I remember wanting to go and being there, and I never really assessed it. We moved to Michigan in 1966, and there's a People's Church. And even in high school, I found myself going to church on occasion. And then after we were married and had kids, and we moved to Franklin, Massachusetts, new in town, not knowing anybody, we started going to church. And I realized that church was a special place for me because there were people there who thought like I thought, but most importantly, allowed me to think like I think. The reason I was saying I was fairly estranged from my family is the high expectations about who I was supposed to be. And I never really met those expectations and was not really accepted for who I thought I was, who I wanted to be. And even all the way back to going to church, to Sunday school as a child, 7, 8, 9 years old, I found that I could go someplace and be safe, someplace where I felt accepted for who I was. And then when we moved to Michigan, I met this wonderful woman here who accepted me as I am instead of as I'm supposed to be, and learned a whole new lesson about self-identity and who I could become. And so ever since, really, I've found church to be a safe place. One of the parishioners in Newark many years ago, when I was talking with her, I asked her, I said, how come you come to church? And she says, because that's where I can talk about stuff I don't talk about anywhere else. So it's not about safety in the dog-eat-dog primal world. It's about people. And it's about the people that we're in relationship with. And it's about what that relationship means to us as individuals, how it encourages us to be ourselves, how it encourages us to be our better selves. A place of belonging is not just about survival, but it's about becoming. It's belonging and becoming. So part of what I want to talk about today is this whole notion about where do you belong? Think about the many groups that you do belong to. I don't know what they are: gardening clubs, art clubs, chess clubs, bridge clubs, book clubs, jazz clubs, whatever. Think about, why do you belong to those groups? What is about that group? It's not about this. Thank you. See, you always need somebody looking out for you. Yeah. What is it that brings you there, that you bring to the group, but also you get out of the group? What is it that makes you feel like you belong there? I think that a lot of times one of the great signature lines in my email is the quote from Henry David Thoreau, who says, "Only that day dawns to which we are awake." And I think so much of our life we spend sort of just wandering along, don't really think about it. So to be specific about thinking about the groups that you belong to, and then it elevates that relationship, and it elevates the benefits of that relationship to a whole new level, dare I say, a spiritual level, when we stop to realize the significance of the choices that we make about where we belong, so that it becomes increased in its value to us, so that we see it not just as a place to be and to do something or create something, but to be in relationship. One of the things that I do is I play chess with John. He used to beat me all the time. He doesn't anymore. That's what I've learned from John, how to beat him. No. But I realized that, when I play chess, for instance, the game is an excuse to be there in a moment, to be in a relationship. One of the things we enjoy doing is playing chess in the park. And so that we can enjoy the season. We can take a time away from the hectic list of errands we have to run and the places we have to be, and we can sit and be present. And I used to think it was to play chess, but it's not. It's to find a place and a time to be aware and awake and conscious. And I find driving down here this morning, the familiar road coming down 213, and realizing my wife actually asked me, she said, "Are you looking forward to this or not?" Because I am retired. And I had to think about it, and I was thinking, yeah, these are I said, there are some really nice people at UUCR. And it's nice to be able to see faces, not with the masks, for instance. But it's really nice to be here. I feel like I belong here in a lot of ways because you folks bring out the best in me, I hope. You folks make me feel welcome. There's a stability here that I know that I can count on and come back to from time to time. And I hope that you find many of those same kinds of issues when finding your place of belonging. So I really would like to hear from you. I'll open this up to a discussion. We're going to have to play around with this. I understand there are some restrictions on what we're supposed to be able to do here. But I'd like to hear from you your thoughts about belonging and specifically about the groups that you belong to and thinking about the importance and the significance of those groups, what they bring to you and you bring to them that fulfill your life and enrich it. Does that make sense? Can we do that?
So we have 2 mics and we will hold it for you. Just let us know who wants to talk. This is Mark.
I'll hold it.
Okay. I joined the church a couple months ago. I guess, I don't know, 3 months, maybe 4. And I only joined because my cat was missing, and I made a promise that if he came back, I'd go to church. And since I've been here, I can't emphasize enough how good it makes me feel on Sundays. It's the only day of the week I have that I actually enjoy my life around all the people that are here. They've all been great, they supportive, and I just can't thank them enough for being, or for me being part of this organization. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, who knows what brings us to these places? Absolutely.
Greg, what you were saying about going to church. I went to a little Methodist church and I would sit there, and what did I get out of it? I essentially sat there and said, that's probably not true. That's probably not true. You know, and then we got Sunday school, but then I went to a Presbyterian church and the minister taught it, and he would listen to dissent. He was open to questions. And then I went past that and I then start dating a girl who half the county dated, a very popular girl. But she tried to do the right thing for me. She'd take me to church on Sunday nights. And then I would tell her afterwards what was wrong with that approach. And then I found Unitarians where you could think independently and say, is it fact-based? Is it likely to be true? So yes, I feel like much of a member here. The only other group I really appreciate is going to WCR courses, because again, we have thinking people who's considering things on their merits and not just by some tradition before, although tradition is important.
Thanks.
You hit it when you, yeah, okay. You hit it when you mentioned what your history, your legacy, background. And the church has always been since I was young, very young, raised in a Lutheran church. And my family was very engaged in that, but it was always that was always my community. And whenever we've looked to move anywhere, I said, there's got to be a Unitarian church there, because they're people who appreciate thinking and exploring and bring a sense of community. And that's what I find here as well. So it's always a welcoming place where I just feel like I can be myself. And sense of community is what it's all about for us.
So everybody go like this.
Had been in the Unitarian church when I was younger because I had a boyfriend who was Unitarian. And when I moved to Augusta, Georgia, I was so lost because I was a confirmed Northerner in a very southern city. And I, for a long time, I wanted to go away. And then I found the Unitarian church and suddenly I belonged. And so I've been a Unitarian ever since. It was just amazing how much more I felt the belonging when I got to that church.
Well, it certainly has been a blessing to me, and I appreciate all this, but we don't have to harp on Unitarians and Universalists. It reminds me, as Janie's, my wife and I traveled to Florence, Italy. I don't know how many of you have ever been there, but that's home. That feels like home. We go there and we spend 3 weeks, rent an apartment, and fortunately, we've been able to check off all the stuff you have to go see. So now when we go, we don't have to go see anything, but we have our favorite restaurants and our favorite artists and people to see. And so we go there and it's hard to leave because we belong there. We fit there. There's something about that place for us, which is spiritual. It's not just a vacation. It's almost like we have to be there. We belong there.
Thank you, Greg. Nice to have you back. So I moved to Kent County, Chestertown, 2005, and didn't know anyone, and took myself to a quaint, charming, historic church. Historical. Anyway, pretty near me. And I went 2 weeks in a row and no one said good morning, put out a hand, said welcome. I felt like I wasn't really there. Nobody could see me. But anyway, at that time, back then, our newspaper, where all the churches would be listed, said Unitarian Universalist down in the corner, because they went alphabetically, the uncommon denomination. Well, I'd never heard of it, but I thought, I'm going to give that a shot. And as you know, I was very warmly greeted, welcomed, loved it. So I've been coming ever since.
That's it.
Welcome.
Can I? But just the sense of belonging, it just comes to me. When I retired, and I'm sure many of you can identify with this, I miss my classes. I miss those kids. I miss it all. But what I really miss are the women and men that I worked with every single day for years and years and years. We were family. We belonged together. And when somebody had an issue, we won't get into the details, but we were there for them. And so that sense of belonging goes to work and to clubs and everything, as well as churches.
So I have just a couple of hopefully brief comments. I was raised a Catholic, and when I started a family, my former partner, my young son, decided that we would go to a different denomination each week until we found a church that we connected with. And by happenstance, we happened to go to the Unitarian church in the city that we lived near. And we sat down and they started the service, and a gentleman got up to sing the opening song. And he sang, "What Kind of Fool Am I?" and we never left. It was a connection, but the real comment that I wanted to make is what you touched on, and that is that there are places that for one reason or another, you connect with on some very basic primal level, and you can't predict that in every case. You can't analyze it, you can't look for it. But I think that the one thing that helps me, and I'm a newcomer to this area, I've only been here a short of a year, is that when I go to different gatherings and I'm around people quite a bit, I'm not comfortable when everybody seems to share something in common. I'm looking for situations where there's a difference, and whether they be cultural differences, economic differences, or whatever, that for some reason or other form this composite that says, hey, this feels good. Pay attention to this. And I feel connected. So that's my soul search.
Well, thanks for that. That's one of the things I'm trying to touch on. Absolutely, we as Unitarians and Universalists, we share a lot of things, but a lot of the things that we share is that it's okay to not share things, to have a different opinion. It's okay to disagree about things, accept that as the reality, and then still value the relationship and hold on to the relationship, rather than demanding that people conform to a certain set of guidelines or creeds or doctrines. You remind me also, I didn't mention, of course, you all know, South Africa. The first time I went purely by accident, I went there with a seminar from seminary to study the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Was there in January of 2002, and so it was 20 years ago, and been back 22 times since then. And I came back and I said to Mary, I says, something happened. I don't know what it is. I can't describe it. It's beyond words, but I had an experience that has changed everything. The world is entirely different now. And she just, had a glassy look, and like most of you. And I just said, well, we have to go back. So the following year, I went back, and then Mary and our two kids, Whitney and Rachel, came over, and we spent, and she hadn't been there maybe a day. And she looked at me and said, you're right. And I said, what do you mean? She says, something, but I can't tell you what it is. But there was something about being there and belonging there, especially in a time when South Africa was trying to become something significant while we were invading the Middle East, and not asking why things happened the way they did. So it can be places, but it can also be the relationships that you develop with people, of course. Because a place is just a place, but the people that we encounter there are the soul of the place. Comments, further comments? We have 1, 2, 3, this side.
When I was a young lad, strapping lad, my parents would always send us boys off to Sunday school while they spent the Sunday morning in bed. And it would always be the closest church. In this case, it was a Methodist church. And after a while of spending each Sunday in the basement, I decided I would go upstairs and see what the hell the adults were doing up there. And so I sat there through the service, not understanding anything. But when the basket was passed, and I realized we were supposed to put money in there, and I had none, I was totally embarrassed. But and none of the adults after the service approached me, nor the minister. I think it put me off religion until I walked in this place when my daughter was giving an address about her 10 years in El Salvador, and I felt that mysterious belonging when I walked in here some 40 years later, 50 maybe.
Who's counting?
Maybe just these two, huh?
I find a sense of belonging in several places, but I'm sure we all experience this. We have friends that at a different point in life before we were retired and everybody moves somewhere else. But I get together with those people maybe every 5 year, 5, 6 years in between. And it's like no time has passed. We just drop right back into the friendship, the relationship, talking about important things. It's just kind of reassuring, very reassuring. Yeah.
That's great. And I appreciate that. But it reminds me of the fact that going to my 25th high school reunion and going, who are these people? I don't know any of these people. I have nothing in common with any of these people. So all the more reason to value when you do find some circle of friends or family or whatever that you have a significant relationship with. As I said, for me, it's not family. So.
And talk about something other than UU. I used to go on these vision missions in Central America. And that was also a group that I felt a part of, because we were there just to help the people. We weren't trying to spread any other ideas. But another group also, we've gone to 16 trips with overseas adventure. And there's different people each time, but all the people that go there want to know about the culture of the country and more than just see the highlights. And I really appreciate it, even though the groups are different, the aim is always the same with the group.
Okay, just one last thing. Absolutely, when traveling around, I mean, one of the reasons I think that we feel so at home in Florence is the many people that we've made friends with there. So it's not a matter of going to Florence to see the Duomo or the David. It's a matter of going to the Florence to see Naeem and Barad and Nico and the people that are important to us, because that's what the draw is, the relationships with the people, and that encourage us to be who we are, even ugly Americans.
Thank you, Greg. Greg is returning in a couple of months, and we look forward to that already. For closing words, you might remember that book, Tuesdays with Maury, remember, by Mitch Albom. Well, this story is about a little wave bobbing along in the ocean, having a grand old time. He's enjoying the wind and the fresh air until he notices the other waves in front of him crashing against the shore. My God, this is terrible, the wave says. Look what's going to happen to me. Then along comes another wave. It sees the first wave looking grim and says to him, why do you look so sad? The first wave says, you don't get it. We're all going to crash. All of us, waves are going to be nothing. Isn't it terrible? And the second wave says, no, you don't understand. You're not a wave. You're part of the ocean. May we remember that we're all part of something so much greater than our own small selves, and to that and each other we belong. And now the words to extinguish the chalice are in your order of service, and we will extinguish the flame together. We extinguish his flame, but not the light of truth, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. Okay. Go lift it up, love bless your way. Moonlight, starlight, guide your journey into peace and the brightness of day. And now we'll have the post-food. Thank you, Kate, and thank you, Reverend Greg. And now let's gather up the goodness of this hour together, taking it in for ourselves and sending it out into the world for someone who might be on your heart and mind today. And that all men everywhere may find peace and belonging. Have a wonderful week, and please join us for the congregational meeting in maybe 15, 20 minutes, something like that. See you then.